Sheni Shel Shavu'ot, second day of Pentecost weeks. Sheni Shel Shavu'ot, second day of Pentecost weeks. Torah Devarim, Deuteronomy, words, 14:22-16-17, Haftarah Havakuk, Habakkuk, 3:1-19, Pirit Hadashah Acts 2:1-47, Torah Devarim, Deuteronomy, words, 14:22-16-17 14:22 Every year you must take 1/10 of everything your seed produces in the field, and eat it in the presence of Adonai your God. In the place where he chooses to have his name live you will eat the 10th of your grain, new wine and olive oil, and the firstborn of your cattle and sheep, so that you will learn to fear Adonai your God always. But if the distance is too great for you, so that you are unable to transport it, because the place where Adonai chooses to put his name is too far away from you, then, when Adonai your God prospers you, you are to convert it into money, take the money with you, go to the place which Adonai your God will choose, and exchange the money for anything you want: cattle, sheep, wine, other intoxicating liquor, or anything you please, and you are to eat there in the presence of Adonai your God, and enjoy yourselves, you and your household, but don't neglect the Levite staying with you, because he has no share or inheritance like yours. At the end of every 3 years you are to take all the tenths of your produce from that year and store it in your towns. Then the Levi, because he has no share or inheritance like yours, along with the foreigner, the orphan and the widow living in your towns, will come, eat and be satisfied, so that Adonai your God will bless you in everything your hands produce. 15:1 At the end of every 7 years you are to have a Shemitah. Here is how the Shemitah is to be done. Every creditor is to give up what he has loaned to his fellow member of the community. He is not to force his neighbor or relative to repay it. Because Adonai's time of remission has been proclaimed, you may demand that a foreigner repay his debt, but you are to release your claim on whatever your brother owes you. In spite of this, there will be no one needy among you, because Adonai will certainly bless you in the land which Adonai your God is giving you as an inheritance to possess, if only you will listen carefully to what Adonai your God says and take care to obey all these mitzvot I am giving you today. Yes, Adonai your God will bless you, as he promised you. You will lend money to many nations without having to borrow, and you will rule over many nations without their ruling over you. If someone among you is needy, one of your brothers, in any of your towns in your land which Adonai your God is giving you, you are not to harden your heart or shut your hand from giving to your needed brother. No, you must open your hand to him and lend him enough to meet his need and enable him to obtain what he wants. Guard yourself against allowing your heart to entertain the mean-spirited thought that because the 7th year, the year of Shemitah, is at hand, you will be stingy toward your needed brother and not give him anything, for then he may cry out to Adonai against you, and it will be your sin. Rather, you must give to him, and you are not to be grudging when you give to him. If you do this, Adonai your God will bless you in all your work, in everything you undertake, for there will always be poor people in the land. That is why I am giving you this order. You must open your hand to your poor and needy brother in your land. If your kinsman, a Hebrew man or woman, is sold to you, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year, you are to set him free. Moreover, when you set him free, don't let him leave empty-handed, but supply him generously from your flock, threshing floor and winepress. From what Adonai your God has blessed you with, you are to give to him. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Adonai your God redeemed you. That is why I am giving you this order today. But if he says to you, I don't want to leave you, because he loves you and your household, and because his life with you is a good one, then take an awl, and pierce his ear through, right into the door, and he will be your slave forever. Do the same with your female slave. Don't resent it when you set him free, since during his 6 years of service he has been worth twice as much as a hired employee. Then Adonai your God will bless you in everything you do. All the firstborn males in your herd of cattle and in your flock you are to set aside for Adonai your God. You are not to do any work with a firstborn from your herd or shear a firstborn sheep. Each year you and your household are to eat it in the presence of Adonai your God in the place which Adonai will choose. But if it is a defect, is lame or blind, or has some other kind of fault, you are not to sacrifice it to Adonai your God. Rather, eat it on your own property. The unclean and the clean alike may eat it, like the gazelle or the deer. Just don't eat its blood, but pour it out on the ground like water. 16:1 Observe the month of Aviv, and keep Pesach to Adonai your God, for in the month of Aviv, Adonai your God brought you out of Egypt at night. You are to sacrifice the Pesach offering from flock and herd to Adonai your God in the place where Adonai will choose to have his name live. You are not to eat any hametz with it. For 7 days you are to eat with it matzah, the bread of affliction, for you came out of the land of Egypt in haste. Thus you will remember the day you left the land of Egypt as long as you live. No leaven is to be seen with you anywhere in your territory for 7 days. None of the meat from your sacrifice on the first day in the evening is to remain all night until morning. You may not sacrifice the Pesach offering in just any of the towns that Adonai your God is giving you. But at the place where Adonai your God will choose to have his name live, there is where you are to sacrifice the Pesach offering, in the evening, when the sun sets. At the time of year that you came out of Egypt, you are to roast it and eat it in the place Adonai your God will choose. In the morning you will return and go to your tents. For 6 days you are to eat matzah. On the 7th day there is to be a festive assembly for Adonai your God. Do not do any kind of work. You are to count 7 weeks. You are to begin counting 7 weeks from the time you first put your sickle to the standing grain. You are to observe the festival of Shavuot, weeks, for Adonai your God with a voluntary offering, which you are to give in accordance with the degree to which Adonai your God has prospered you. You are to rejoice in the presence of Adonai your God, you, your sons and daughters, your male and female slaves, the Levim living in your towns, and the foreigners, orphans and widows living among you in the place where Adonai your God will choose to have his name live. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, then you will keep and obey these laws. Mafti, 13. You are to keep the festival of Sukkot for 7 days after you have gathered the produce of your threshing floor and winepress. Rejoice at your festival, you, your sons and daughters, your male and female slaves, the Levim, and the foreigners, orphans and widows living among you. 7 days you are to keep the festival for Adonai your God in the place Adonai your God will choose, because Adonai your God will bless you in all your crops and in all your work. So you are to be full of joy. 3 times a year all your men are to appear in the presence of Adonai your God in the place which he will choose at the festival of Matzah, at the festival of Shavuot and at the festival of Sukkot. They are not to show up before Adonai empty-handed, but every man is to give what he can, in accordance with the blessing Adonai your God has given you. Haftarah Havakuk, Habakkuk, 3:1-19. 3:1 This is a prayer of Havakuk the prophet, on musical instruments called Shijinot. Adonai, I have heard the report about you. Adonai, I am awed by your deeds. Bring your work to life in our own age. Make it known in our own time. But in anger, remember compassion. God comes from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Peran Selah. His splendor covers the sky, and his praise fills the earth. His brightness is like the sun. Rays come forth from his hand. That is where his power is concealed. Before him goes pestilence, and close behind, the plague. When he stands up, the earth shakes. When he looks, the nations tremble. The eternal mountains are smashed to pieces. The ancient hills sink down. The ancient paths are his. I saw trouble in the tents of Gushan, and the tent hangings shaking in the land of Midian. Adonai, is it against the rivers that your anger is inflamed? Is your fury directed at the sea? Is that why you ride on your horses, and drive your chariots to victory? You brandish your naked bow, and order it filled with arrows. Selah. You split the earth with rivers. The mountains see you and tremble. A torrent of water streams by. The deep thunders forth, as it raises enormous waves. The sun and moon stand still in the sky. At the light of your arrows speeding by, at the gleam of your glittering spear, in fury you stride across the land. In anger you trample the nations. You come out to save your people. To save your anointed one, you crush the head of the house of the wicked, uncovering its foundation all the way to the neck. With their own rod you pierce the head of their warriors, who come like a whirlwind to scatter us, who rejoice at the prospect of devouring the poor in secret. You tread down the sea with your horses, churning up the mighty waters. When I heard, my whole body trembled, my lips shook at the sound, weakness overcame my limbs, my legs gave way beneath me, but I wait calmly for the day of trouble, when it comes upon our assailants. For even if the fig tree doesn't blossom, and no fruit is on the vines, even if the olive tree fails to produce, and the fields yield no food at all, even if the sheep vanish from the sheep pen, and there are no cows in the stalls, still, I will rejoice in Adonai. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. Elohim Adonai is my strength. He makes me swift and sure-footed as a deer, and enables me to stride over my high places. For the leader, with my stringed instruments. Pirit Hadashah Acts 2:1-47. Acts 2:1 The festival of Shavuot arrived, and the believers all gathered together in one place. Suddenly there came a sound from the sky like the roar of a violent wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. Then they saw what looked like tongues of fire, which separated and came to rest on each one of them. They were all filled with the Ruach HaKodesh and began to talk in different languages, as the Spirit enabled them to speak. Now there were staying in Jerusalem religious Jews from every nation under heaven. When they heard this sound, a crowd gathered. They were confused, because each one heard the believer speaking in his own language. Totally amazed, they asked, "How is this possible? And all these people who are speaking from the Galilee, how is it that we hear them speaking in our native languages? We are Parthians, Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judah, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, the parts of Libya near Cyrene, visitors from Rome, Jews by birth and proselytes, Jews from Crete and from Arabia. How is it that we hear them speaking in our own languages about the great things God has done?" Amazed and confused, they all went on asking each other, "What can this mean?" But others made fun of them and said, "They just had too much wine." Then Kepha stood up with the 11 and raised his voice to address them. "You Judeans, and all of you staying here in Jerusalem, let me tell you what this means. Listen carefully to me. These people aren't drunk, as you suppose it's only 9 in the morning. No, this is what was spoken about through the prophet Joel. Adonai says, "In the last days, I will pour out from my spirit upon everyone. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your young men will see visions, your old men will dream dreams, even on my slaves, both men and women, will I pour out from my spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. I will perform miracles in the sky above, and signs on the earth below, blood, fire and thick smoke. The sun will become dark, and the moon blood, before the great and fearful day of Adonai comes, and then, whoever calls on the name of Adonai will be saved." Men of Israel, listen to this. Yeshua from Nazareth was a man demonstrated to you to have been from God by the powerful works, miracles and signs that God performed through him in your presence. You yourselves know this. This man was arrested in accordance with God's predetermined plan and foreknowledge, and, through the agency of persons not bound by the Torah, you nailed him up on a stake and killed him. But God has raised him up and freed him from the suffering of death. It was impossible that death could keep its hold on him. For David says this about him, "I saw Adonai always before me, for he is at my right hand, so that I will not be shaken. For this reason, my heart was glad, and my tongue rejoiced, and now my body too will live on in the certain hope, that you will not abandon me to Sheol, or let your Holy One see decay. You have made known to me the ways of life, you will fill me with joy by your presence." Brothers, I know I can say to you frankly that the patriarch David died and was buried. His tomb is with us to this day. Therefore, since he was a prophet and knew that God had sworn an oath to him that one of his descendants would sit on his throne, he was speaking in advance about the resurrection of the Messiah, that it was he who was not abandoned in Sheol and whose flesh did not see decay. God raised up this Yeshua, and we are all witnesses of it. Moreover, he has been exalted to the right hand of God, has received from the Father what he promised, namely, the Ruach HaKodesh, and has poured out this gift, which you are both seeing and hearing. For David did not descend into heaven, but he says, "Adonai said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet." Therefore, let the whole house of Israel know beyond doubt that God has made him both Lord and Messiah, this Yeshua, whom you executed on a stake. On hearing this, they were stung in their hearts, and they said to Kepha and the other emissaries, "Brothers, what should we do?" Kepha answered them, "Turn from sin, return to God, and each of you be immersed on the authority of Yeshua the Messiah into forgiveness of your sins, and you will receive the gift of the Ruach HaKodesh, for the promise is for you, for your children, and for those far away, as many as Adonai our God may call." He pressed his case with many other arguments and kept pleading with them, "Save yourselves from this perverse generation." So those who accepted what he said were immersed, and there were added to the group that day about 3,000 people. They continued faithfully in the teaching of the emissaries, in fellowship, in breaking bread and in the prayers. Everyone was filled with awe, and many miracles and signs took place through the emissaries. All those trusting in Yeshua stayed together and had everything in common. In fact, they sold their property and possessions and distributed the proceeds to all who were in need. Continuing faithfully and with singleness of purpose to meet in the temple courts daily, and breaking bread in their several homes, they shared their food in joy and simplicity of heart, praising God and having the respect of all the people. And day after day the Lord kept adding to them those who were being saved.